Welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Hinchcliffe. I am the Exhibitions and Events Manager at the San Francisco Center for the Book. I want to welcome everyone today to our Shelter in Studio presentation with Michelle Wilson. Michelle is an interdisciplinary artist whose work is grounded in papermaking. She's an instructor at Stanford University and San Jose State University, and she's part of the Rhinoceros Project Collective with artist Anne Beck. In her practice, she explores various forms of hand papermaking and the applications to history, materiality, current events, and storytelling. She currently resides in the East Bay, and we're very excited to have her sharing her studio with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight Michelle's video so that all of you can pay attention, and I'm going to call out Ellen. Please mute yourself. All right, here we go. Michelle, I'm spotlighting your video. Take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for coming. So yeah, I'm a papermaker. It is sort of the foundation for my entire practice. And welcome to my studio. I kept thinking about Andy Rotner's Shelter in Studio, where he was like, it's got a roll top door, which was his way of saying the studio's in the garage. Mine is as well, though I have more of a gate door. So I've been making paper for about 15 years or so, where I started as a little vague, but, and I make paper in both the Eastern and the Western tradition. Modern papermaking as we know it started in China in about the 1st century AD, and it spread from China up through Korea and down into Japan. And in Japan, it kind of, because they have different plants than papermaking, I should say, sort of has, of course, applications in history all spread around the world. Their modern papermaking, let me stress, has it's been adapted and changed and shifted. And like, so when I say I practice both Eastern and Western traditions, it's sort of like saying you're a baker, right? Like bakers bake bread, and it's sort of the same basic ingredients all over the world, but like you can go to Mexico and get a tortilla, or you can go to like France and get a baguette, and they're pretty much the same ingredients, just treated very differently. And so the papermaking is very similar. So in Japan, when paper came there, they started making paper out of 3 main plants, one of which was kozo, which looks sort of like this on the plant. It's a tree. It is a renewable tree. It can be cut down every year and it will grow back. So, and then, but what they make paper out of, sort of like this, it is the bast fiber, the inner bark of the tree. So the bark is stripped off of what's called the hurd, the inner bark, the wood of the tree. And then the outer bark has to be scraped off of this fiber. And it gets dried and looked like this. And I have, I'm going to tilt the screen a little bit, a big bale of it right here that I got from Magnolia Editions a couple years ago when they were clearing out some of their stock. So in Japan, they make paper on a thing called a sugeta, which I'm going to turn the screen a little bit here to show. So sugeta looks like this. It's sometimes also spelled with a K, suketa. It consists of 2 parts. This frame thing is called the geta, and then this bamboo screen is called the su, and it is very finely woven bamboo sticks, basically, that have been pushed through, made there very, very, very fine and delicate, and it goes together as a unit, like so. I got this actually in Richmond several years ago from an elderly Japanese woman who was cleaning out her supply, and I got referred to her, and I showed up, and she said, it's $100, but you have to take everything. And it was a big pile of stuff, and a lot of it was crap. But this was in there, and when I realized it was $100, this is worth way more than $100 bucks. So I filled up my trunk, and I had to throw away a lot of her stuff, but I got the sugeta because of it. in Japanese papermaking, the fiber is hand beaten. So I have random things like mallets, and this is a Japanese style mallet as well to beat fiber. And so like it is, what I do is I take this stuff and it gets cooked, and while it is wet, I basically whack on it until it is beaten to a pulp. It's not very graceful, but that sugata and that fiber is what I used to make this book, which was all interiorly, all made from kozo, from that bale right there. I set the type at the center and printed it there. Linoleum blocks were printed here behind me on this press, which is a Meeker McPhee. If you know anything about etching style presses, it is a press that came out of the University of Wisconsin. In the 60s, it was a Meeker and McPhee were a printmaker, and which is all tubular steel. And which has been great because I've had to move my studio a couple of times. And if it were something like a heavy Charles brand, lucky that way. So I'm going to show one other thing, and that's going to involve moving the camera. So you want to close your eyes a second. I'm going to carry it over here. And so when I make paper in a Western style, for the most part, so when papermaking came to Europe, so it spread outward from China to Samarkand and in 751 AD, Muslim conquest raided Samarkand and brought back many prisoners of war, including papermakers who brought papermaking to the Middle East, where again, like all technology, it shifted a little bit. And through, again, Muslim conquest, they carried papermaking as a technology up into places like Italy and Spain and Greece, and slowly it permeated throughout the rest of Europe from there. When it got to places like Italy and Spain, they invented huge, basically stamper beaters, which were attached to giant water wheels that would sort of have these big pounders that would pound the pulp, pound fiber into pulp. But as papermaking spread further north and finally into Holland, Holland doesn't have the same sort of water courses that Southern Europe does. You know, they have all the dikes and whatnot. And so they had to invent a different way to beat pulp. And what was invented was a machine like this called a Hollander beater, hence the name. The Hollander beaters were originally powered by wind. I plugged this one in. But the idea being it's sort of a circular unit, I'll show you in a second, with a beater roll, and it pounds the fiber. So fiber, when it's been beaten either by hand or in a Hollander beater, it's actually breaking the fiber. A lot of times people say it macerates it. That's actually not accurate. It's actually, the chemical term is fibrillating, where it sort of agitates it and breaks the fibers down into smaller and smaller bits, but they have very rough edges so that they can link together to make paper. So got the cover. This right here. Hopefully lift this in so you can see the inside. This is sort of awkward to do on the laptop. So you can see here, this is very extreme, but there is what's called the beater roll. And this has, underneath it also has blades like this. And the two together, as it circulates, fibrillate the fiber. And water is carrying it sort of around that unit and macerating it. And depending on how long you beat it, like everything in papermaking, you can get paper that is good for casting and sheet forming or sculptural work or whatever. So I'm going to carry this back to where its original position. So one of the things that questions that comes up with as a paper maker is, what do I make paper out of? So I've shown you kozo, which is what I make paper out of when I'm working in Eastern style. And when paper making came to Europe, they didn't have trees like the paper mulberry tree, which is what I refer to sometimes as. And So they ended up making paper out of rags. Anything that is cellulose-based can be made into paper. So most of the time it was either linen or hemp. Cotton didn't come in till a little later in history. But basically there was a whole economy of people who would be called rag pickers, who would go around your town and buy rags from people. I kind of liken them to like the people who get your aluminum cans now. And then they would sell them to the paper makers, who generally lived outside of town because paper making was a little stinky. So it was this sort of whole economy. And it also meant, you know, it changed the economy of how books were produced, since we are center for the book. You know, prior to that, in Europe at least, they had animal skins, which meant it took a whole, like, if you wanted a big animal skin, you had to raise the animal and then, you know, process and kill it, and then, you know, scrape its skin and hope it didn't rot. And so it was like a lot of effort to make something that could then be into a book. But with the advent of papermaking, you see, it sort of coincided with the same time of block books and incunabula, and very shortly after that you see Gutenberg sort of launching movable type. But all of that had to be in place for books to be able to be what was called mass produced for prior to the Industrial Revolution. So what we have in Europe, you often see or you hear the phrase rag paper, or you hear that now, rag paper, and that refers to that history of how paper was made from rags. I tend to work a lot with a lot of non-traditional materials. This is one I'll show very shortly. This is sort of a mix of materials. I'll show you the front in a second. This is made from denim, blue jeans, and corn husk. And so it was actually what's called double couched. So, and with a watermark. So, and this yellow fiber you see here is corn husk. And this is a whole series I did about sort of the corn-based food system we have here in the United States. But basically, I pulled a sheet of blue jeans, and while it was still wet, I pulled another sheet with a watermark, which I'll show you in a second, on the mold with the USDA logo. And then they were pressed and dried together, so they are one sheet of paper. So in Europe, I'm gonna grab this. Use sugettas. They use a system called a mold and decal. So this is a mold and decal that was actually built by Magnolia Editions many years ago. Pretty simple. It's the mold part is sort of a window screen to compare it to, and then the decal is sort of a frame that sits on top. So if you've ever heard the decal edge of paper, if you're ever buying like nice printmaking paper and it talks about having decal edge paper, like Reeves BFK, they say they have 2 decal edges. That phrase, though they are not handmade papers, they are machine made, but that comes from the decal edge in papermaking. So a watermark traditionally was a wire that was sewn to a wire mold. I don't have wire molds. So it basically disrupts the fiber. It kind of to make the paper thinner in areas where the watermark is. So this is a watermark of a buffalo. This was made actually with sandblasting vellum, or sandblasting vinyl, excuse me, which is self-adhesive. So I can peel this off when I'm done and save it, and also put it back on if I need to. And then the watermark it made, I'm gonna see, or I can show this, is this, which, hold on, I'm gonna put my phone's flashlight on and hope to eliminate it, show you from the back, but because I don't think you can see it otherwise, but maybe not. No, not happening. There, kind of, right? Can you see that? Yes. Okay, so I'll I'll hold it up again. You can kind of see it without the, maybe I was being too techy, but you can kind of see the watermark. Again, it creates, it's a little easier if I do it. There we go. Breaking light. But basically, it's an interruption in the sheet where it gets thinner. And for me, like they were originally basically a way for paper makers to mark their paper, right? It was to indicate what paper maker made what paper. But nowadays, to me, I see them as sort of this like mystery. You can't really duplicate this in I trained as a printmaker, and I still have a love, like make prints and love prints, but this is not a mark you can make as a printmaker. You can't make it any other way but in papermaking, and it's only revealed with light. And I think that that is some sort of mysterious, like magical thing that I still adore, and I'm still fascinated by, and still continue to make. But I think we're kind of almost getting to the point. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Michelle about her process or her work, go ahead and just type those into the chat for me, and we'll start taking questions. I have a question for you, Michelle. We'll just get the party started right now. Can you tell us about that awesome poster that is behind you on the wall that says "Be Outraged"?
Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about this. So this is this was a poster I made with at the Oakland Museum right before the Women's March with Anthony Ryan. It's his design. It's a screen print. It's been around the block. It's kind of worn, but we were printing posters for people to carry in the march, and it's been carried in a couple of marches since then. It's a little beat up, but it is that. It's a relic from the Women's March. But
Great, thank you. All right, we do have some questions. People are really interested in watermarks. So let's see here. Oh, Gail would like to know about your giant rhinoceros watermark.
Yeah, it's actually too big for me to actually show.
Okay.
I would love to show it, but like I mean, it's taller than my ceiling. It is rolled up, and right now in my bedroom, right next to my bedroom. I could show some images of the pour if people want to see. I could share the screen because I'm actually, we talked about this. Because of the limits of time, when I make my sheets of paper, I work outside because it's very wet. So if people want to, I could show some shots of pouring the giant watermark and how it looks now.
Well, it seems like we have a lot of questions just in general. So okay. If you want, we can stick with that.
It sounds fine.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So folks have questions about the buffalo watermark, and one person asked if you could repeat the name of the material that you used on the screen.
It's just sandblasting vinyl.
Sandblasting vinyl. And then Patty Wakita asked, how do you get the vinyl to stick to your paper making screen? You said you can put it on and stick it back on.
It comes with an adhesive on the back. So it just peels off and sticks on. And when I peel it off, I have an old pad of acetate and I just stick it on there, because if I stuck it on something like paper or something like, it would, that would stick when I peel it off. So it's like something like an acetate, I can peel it off and put it back on my screen. But that's part of the material. There is a material that's designed for watermarks called Buttercut, which you can get from a place called Carriage House Paper in Brooklyn, and which is wonderful. And I just ended up using this stuff because a couple years ago with the Master's project, we traveled to Salina, Kansas, and they wanted us to teach a watermark workshop, and we suggested purchasing Buttercut. And they're like, well, what about this stuff we found on Amazon? And we were like, sure, that sounds great. And we've been using it ever since because they got us this enormous roll. So wow. It hasn't run out yet.
That's cool. Wow. Let's see. There's another question about, could you talk a little bit about your book that you made from paper using endangered plants?
Yeah, so I've made a couple, but the one I got right here to pull out. So maybe I'm gonna make some space here. So this was a book I made. I'm gonna tilt it down because it's just a little easier to hold. Sort of comparing endangered languages to endangered species. So it sort of focuses on a bird called the red knot that, maybe that's better, migrates from like sort of northern Canada to down in Tierra del Fuego. And it's a long distance flyer, which I was sort of intrigued with. Like it flies for like 2 weeks straight. Like it flies from Tierra del Fuego up to Brazil, and then it flies to like the Delaware Bay, which is where I actually started this research, where outside of Philly, and then up to like another 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks up to northern Canada. And so this was, but I saw the invasive plants because invasive plants, when they come when they invade, for lack of a better word, they tend to create a monoculture. They wipe out the indigenous variety, and they sort of take over. And I saw them as sort of this metaphor for westernization, like how like Walmart and Target and PepsiCo can be found all over the world. So I was making these are what you're seeing here are papers made from French broom. This is ice plant, which actually when you cook it turns this great purple color. I haven't explored it as a dye plant, though I know people have, but yeah, it's like kind of cool. And then there's ice plant again. And this was also ice plant, though I pigmented it because I needed a blue for the image, so I cheated there. But then I got into, this is artichoke thistle. So artichokes have, and I get people correcting me on this. So, but basically artichokes have, they were domesticated in Italy, and then they came to California, and we do grow them for food, and they are domesticated, but they've also sort of hybridized and gone feral. And so they often take over and spread. Sometimes I hear it also called cardoon, and I know there's some sort of difference, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to know. But so this is artichoke thistle, which I think were the 3 plants I ended up using in the book. But I'm actually really interested because I think also French broom, these were all made Western style. And there's some of this, I don't know if you can see it, there's actually is pulp painted. So pulp paint, sorry, is when, this is cotton, but it has been beaten so finely that it would not have any integrity as a sheet of paper, but you can use stencils, or you can sometimes paint with it, like with a brush when you mix enough of a coagulant with it. And like this yellow is pulp paint. Which I kind of liked because I was printing with linoleum blocks and letterpress, which is a very sharp, crisp graphic punch. And I liked with the pulp paint, I got sort of a contrast and a subtle, like maybe I can hold this up, but like even this like boat here has like, you can see like a subtle change in, maybe, I can't tell if you guys can see this, but it was a softer mark in contrast with that crisper mark. And, but I think French broom, because it's also a bast fiber, which this is French broom, I think it would also be, I have not tested this, it's on my to-do list to try out, but I think it would also work very well like on Mitsumata, which is a Japanese fiber. So I think it would actually work as both a Western papermaking fiber and a Eastern papermaking fiber.
So Michelle, just to clarify, because there are a couple questions, you're making the paper, you're sometimes doing pulp painting as well as a background strata, and then you're letterpressing, sometimes stenciling, sometimes doing printmaking techniques on top of that handmade paper?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, it's super interesting. Yeah, somebody asked if you were actually printing on top of the, like,
Yes.
are the images printed on top of the
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, this is the pulp, the blue here is the pulp paint, but everything else was either a linoleum block I printed, or like, there's a subtle letterpress word here. And all of these papers have an indigenous, so the 2 indigenous languages that I researched at the bottom of Tierra del Fuego is a language called Yagan, which is, it is down to 1 final speaker, fluent speaker. So here's Tierra del Fuego. And then at the top of northern Canada is a language called Inuktitut. And I am not a speaker of either one of these languages. And like, this is why this book took me like 5 years to make, not just like because of all the technical stuff, but I was trying to like learn as much of an understanding as I could of these languages. But so there is letterpress on each page, I think, is the answer to that question. But yes, there's also like linoleum blocks and pulp painting.
Wow. I'm going to ask one more question. Someone wants to know, well, technically 2 questions folded into each other. Someone is wondering if you dip or pour, and then how do you do large paper pours? Because they're looking for some tips on pulling large sheets of paper.
So the short answer is yes, I do pour sheets. Like the Rhinoceros project, when we made that giant watermark, was a poured sheet. It was the biggest sheet I've ever poured. It took 3 people to actually pour it. So yeah, they're in Southeast Asia. A lot of sheets are actually, they pour pulp into a mold of some sort, and then often the paper then dries in the mold, and that's how it stays flat. So yes, I have poured sheets. If you are, but it's like you make, I only have like 1 or 2 pouring molds, so I make like 1 big sheet, and then it has to dry in the mold for like a day or 2 before I can take it out. If you are trying to make lots of sheets, it's not an efficient way. My answer is yes, if they want to contact me, you can give them my email. I can talk about how to make, like if you're trying to pull big sheets, because you want to make a lot in a reasonable period of time rather than like, you know, over the course of months, then you need a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And you need a lot of pulp, which I know is not a really great answer. I'm sorry, but it's a short one.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, we'll go ahead and just thank Michelle so much for sharing all of your knowledge and also your studio and your setup. It's really amazing to see where all the magic happens. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank everyone who was able to attend today. We're having another Shelter in Studio next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, 12:30 to 1. I'm at a loss for who is actually going to be on the screen next week, but please visit. I believe it's M&H Type. We're doing part 2 of M&H Type. So, and also, again, the best place to stay current on our events and our online offerings is definitely our newsletter, so subscribe, and also our website, www.sfcb.org. All right, thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you online next week. All right, goodbye. Thank you, Michelle.